everyone. My name is Nancy. I'm the director of the Highline Heritage Museum, and we are excited to welcome you to the space. The first time that we're doing side stories in the gallery. The sound travels differently too because of the ceiling. There's acoustic ceiling, so the experience is a lot. Yeah, and obviously everything. And so we're really excited to welcome you. One of the first things that we do is the land acknowledgement. And so this is how we start every program. And I'm going to do it, and I'm going to explain why are we doing what we do. So let's take a moment to recognize that we are on native land. Please think in honor of those who have preceded us, including the people of the Duwamish, the Snoqualmish, Nisqually, and Muckish tribes. Sorry, something there. One of the reasons why we do this is to promote inclusion, diversity, but also want to make sure that there is an acknowledgement of where we are. And knowing that we are promoting those values of respect and acceptance and belonging. And so this is one extension of what we do. Once again, we are really excited to welcome you in. There's several people are joining in, so I can see it's going to be a little bit of distractions as they come in from the back. I'm just going to take one more extra minute just to make sure that we let people in and that everyone is comfortable. So the museum, we opened in 2019. COVID hit 6 months later. And so we haven't not been really operating as a museum until recently. And we got exhibits, we got programs, we got a lot of different things happening. But we would really appreciate if you support us through your donation or membership. As it is, I'm the only staff person here at the museum. It's impossible to host all these different events and not having that funding. And so when we have the gallery open like this, we'll appreciate your support. Like I say, it's one of the ways that we make or sustain ourselves is through people visiting the gallery. And so you're already there, so if you really think that this is an important project for you, please support us. And I think we are going to be ready now. So once again, thank you everyone, and I'm going to let the host introduce the speakers tonight. So thank you.
I'm very happy to see everybody here. There's just, like life, there's some curves that get thrown at you and some different switches in this program tonight. So I'm excited because we got a lot of interesting stories ahead of us. I do want to mention though that the museum has a little box out there. It says donations. So when you walk out, try and drop in a donation, just because we're so thrilled that they partner with 7 Stories and are wonderfully supportive of this program, which is all really about community building. That was the whole reason it was started. And that everybody's stories they're just compelling and interesting, and personally I find it really fascinating. So our first storyteller tonight is Eric. Eric has helped to coordinate 7 Stories. He's been extremely helpful. He also shared with us before how he met his wife. And now, today, we're going to hear his advice. I think we're going to hear his advice to his younger son. And one more thing. I have this little paper plate with number 1 on it, on a yardstick, and I'll hold it up when that is to tell you, good, thank you. That's to tell you that it's time to kind of get to the conclusion of your tale. So, Eric, come on up here. And I wanted to mention, we have, thanks to the museum and conscientious people, handy wipes here to wipe your hands and the mic if you want to. They're right here and available to you. Okay, Eric.
So my buddy John and I knew exactly what we were going to do when we got off that school bus. We were on a field trip down to the legislature with my current events class in my senior year of high school. As soon as that door opened, Sean and I headed to his girlfriend, who was a page in the House of Representatives. And she got us past the locked door, past the doorman, into the inner realms of the House of Representatives. And I know that probably doesn't float you guys' boat much, but I was a teenage political nerd. And so this was really exciting to me. And I had actually been a page in the legislature my sophomore year. It was a great experience. And so I was home So, and then, you know, when the legislature went back into session and Sandy had to go back to work, they kind of just left us in there. I don't know if they forgot about us or Sandy made some kind of arrangement, but there we were, you know, just right at the side of the House floor, listening to debate, and we were just, you know, we were just thrilled, you know, the legislative desk with their microphones and the speaker's platform and the vote tally machine behind there and the visitors gallery and the big ornate thing, you know, we were just, you know, we were in heaven. You know, we didn't really have, the teacher didn't give us any, you know, organized curriculum, but he did sort of give us some directions. The bus was going back at 3, and then, you know, before that, about 1 o'clock, there was going to be kind of a little meet up and, wow, where do you want to go to lunch, that kind of stuff. And so his directions said, you know, meet back at 1 unless you have a front row seat for the big show. And, you know, I have to emphasize here that John and I were not in the front seat of the visitors gallery looking down on the big show. We were, you know, we were right down there on the floor, right next to them. And we were just, you know, enthralled. And, you know, we couldn't have, you know, if we'd left, we couldn't get back in. We were behind a locked door, there was a doorman, and if somehow we left and tried to run back in when he opened the door for a VIP, there were state patrol troopers with guns there, you know, to thwart any kinds of crazies. So, anyway, we stayed. And, you know, 3 o'clock, came rolling around, and we, you know, we still on this day, we were still enthralled by all this, enthused. But, you know, I mean, 3 o'clock, the bus was leaving, you know, what are you going to do? So, you know, we made our way to the Capitol Rotunda. Nobody was there. They had left 2 hours early. No bus, no car, 50 miles from home, 17 years old, abandoned. You know, what were we going to do? We'll go see Sandy's father. He was a state representative. And so we, you know, went up to his office, and John explained our predicament to the guy who would in the future be John's father-in-law. Well, briefly he was. But anyway, and so I remember this conversation very well. So the state rep said, well, why don't you take the dog? Meaning on the Greyhound bus. No. And so John replied, we don't have the biscuits, the fare, the money, the cash. So, you know, what were we going to do? But an aide was found who was going to drive up to Seattle on an errand. And so he was assigned to drop us off on his way. So, you know, it was a very pleasant drive, nice, smooth, pleasant drive. He delivered us right to our door. You know, no bumpy bus, no having to walk home from school. And, you know, we got home about the time that we originally were supposed to, you know, get home. So, you know, I thought about not even telling my mom what had happened. But, you know, the teacher had called my mom and informed her that her son was lost somewhere 50 miles away in Olympia. And fortunately, she didn't panic. So they arranged that I would go to school next morning early and, you know, and kind of explain. And so I got up early, which was really hard for me, and, you know, went down, you know, and talked, oh, I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry about this, you know, but, you know, your note said, no, don't worry about it, we're good, like that. Then, of course, an hour later, he announced to my classmates, well, Eric and John decided to go rogue, and they ran off during our field trip, and really gave a lot of anxiety to their parents and myself. Front row seat, big show, all of that. But, that was it. And so I did nothing. And I thought over the years, why, when this thing kind of crops up in my mind, why, do I, worry about it? What made me so upset? Actually, I got that front row seat for the big show. The abandonment crisis was quickly solved. And, and actually to my betterment. And, the kids didn't really bully me or harass me after, the teacher had embarrassed me. So, but I still get mad. I still get mad. And not only at the teacher, but at myself. Because what I should have done is demand a meeting with the, with the principal and the teacher and my parents and myself. Maybe I should have channeled my inner Perry Mason, which he was my hero at the time. Isn't that true, sir, that you left us abandoned there, and then you wouldn't let us explain? I rest my case, sir, Your Honor. But, I did nothing. And so I guess my advice to my younger self would be, stick up for yourself. And, if there's injustice, to yourself or anybody else, you should stick up for that too. So that's my story.
So Eric is now going to become a rabble-rouser in his middle life here. That was true to form. It's when you're cooperative and nice, it's wonderful. Even though, as now looking back, you wish you stood up for yourself. It's so nice, and you gave that teacher a pass. Our next storyteller is Gretchen. Gretchen Douma came to storytelling about 1.5 years ago, and she fell in love with it. What I find interesting is that she's told stories in a lot of places that maybe some of us haven't heard of. She's also an actor and writer and a playwright, and she's told stories for Fresh Ground Stories, Risk, The Moth, Ottawa Storytellers, Iridescent Robot, Unexpected Productions. She lives in North Seattle with her wife and her 2 miniature Australian Labradoodles. So let's welcome Gretchen.
I'm in the middle of making a quilt. Well, actually, I'm in the middle of remaking a quilt because I don't like the way it turned out the first time I put it together. Now, never mind that it's the first quilt I've ever made, and never mind that it actually looked pretty good when I spread it all out, but I can see that the squares in a couple of places don't line up exactly right, and the edge is a little funky, and I know that every time I look at it, it will drive me crazy. So I get out my seam ripper and I start to take the entire thing apart. Now, this is 100% my mother. My mother was an exacting and demanding woman who was also an incredible creative. She was a great craftsperson. She was really an artist. Everything from gardening to making sculptures to stained glass windows, 5 of which I have in my home, to wood carving. This woman, her creative energy was boundless. And God help you if you ever called her artsy craftsy. The phrase, if looks could kill, was written for my mother. She could slay you with a single look. And she got her interest in making things from her father, whose philosophy in life was, if you have the right tools, you can do anything. My mother lived and died by that philosophy, and so if there's anything in genetics about the urge to make things, I get it from the 2 of them. I lay out the quilt squares, and I grab my best sewing scissors to recut a square that's a little crooked, and I am thrust back immediately to 3rd grade. craft time. I love school, and I especially love craft time and reading circle. Now, reading circle is when we all get to sit around in a big circle on the floor with our teacher, Miss Potter, and we get to practice reading aloud. And we are working our way through Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And craft time, we get to make things. Miss Potter hands out the craft boxes, which are equipped with everything an elementary school student would need for crafting. That includes Elmer's glue and Crayola crayons and colored construction paper, and my personal favorite, a little pair of snub-nosed scissors. They're silver and shiny and they fit my hand perfectly, and with them I do magic. Because mostly what we do is we make decorations for our school classroom, and they usually have a seasonal theme. So I make snowflakes for the winter time, and I cut paper strips that become garlands for the Christmas tree in our classroom. And I cut out large red hearts for Valentine's Day. It's magical and mystical, and I am in my element. And one day, I don't remember what we were making that particular day, but I'm lost in thought, and I'm suddenly distracted by some movement in front of me. I look up. The little girl who is sitting in front of me has done her hair in ringlets. Perfectly gorgeous golden spiral ringlets. I have never seen ringlets before. Now, I know what ringlets are because in the Little House in the Big Woods, Ma used to wind up Laura and Mary's hair in rags and hide them at night so that in the morning when they untied the rags, their hair would fall in these beautiful curls. My hair is white blonde and cut in what now might be called a trendy severe bob, but then I looked like I belonged on the side of a Dutch boy paint can. Straight bangs, cut off even length all the way around. But ringlets, they're mesmerizing. They fall like a golden curtain in front of me, and I don't know what happened, but I am somehow caught up in some kind of coiffure-induced haze, and I reach out, and with my little scissors, I cut ringlets. It falls to my desk like a spiral of silk. Amazingly, the girl whose hair I have just cut doesn't feel it. And Miss Potter doesn't see it because she's at the front of the room. But this is the day my mother has come to visit our class. And from her vantage point at the back of the room, she has seen everything that has just happened to Miss Potter. Miss Potter gathers up our craft tools and she announces it's time for recess, and all the rest of the students start to file out. And that's when I feel my mother's presence by my side and her head on my shoulder like a claw. And that's when I realize I might be in trouble. And my mother guides me to the front of the room. And without saying much, but giving me that withering look, she convinces me to admit my crime. So I tell Miss Potter, and my face is getting hot, and the tears are running down my cheeks, and my mother looks aghast and ashamed and furious all at the same time. Miss Potter takes away my scissors. My creative life has come to an end as I know it. I apologize to Miss Potter, I apologize to the girl whose hair I've cut, I apologize to my mother. I'm sure there was additional punishment when I got home, but I actually don't remember what it was. And over the years, every time I pick up a pair of scissors, I'm reminded of that particular moment in time and the lessons that I learned that I've carried forward with me to this very day. And I'm going to share those with you. Number one, keep your hands to yourself. Number two, do not cut other people's hair if you have not asked their permission. Number three, if you're going to do something really stupid, don't do it while your mother is sitting in the back of the room. Thank you.
I won't go into my putting saran wrap over the toilets when I babysat, because my friend's big sister said it was so funny. My Michael Shilley is our next speaker, our next storyteller. And Michael was born in England, but he's lived in the United States for many years. Many of his stories are from his life, especially his young life in England. Michael is my personal role model because he has great memories and he's got such a detail. He's got all the details and he writes it all down. So he's got a record of all these wonderful experiences and memories in his life. It's something I aspire to. So welcome, Michael Shilley.
These are three little stories from my childhood. And my childhood goes way back, right? We're talking about in the rearview mirror. Well, this also could be the life of a hyperactive kid too. Because I wasn't diagnosed until I was 62 that I was hyperactive. And then a light went off in my head, and I realized all the stupid things I'd done in my life was because of that. But I remember as a kid, back before, just the beginning of the Second World War. I was 4 years old actually when it started, when England declared war on Germany. I was 4 years old, and we used to go out and play all day. We say all the rest of the kids must have been hyperactive too, because we just played till it was dark. And in the corner of the field, a massive great field, and it used to get mowed, but a section was kept for hay. And so in the corner of the field was what they call a haystack, not very well made, but it was like a little house, and rough too. And us kids would play till dark, fall asleep in the hay, and sleep there until it was early morning and it got cold. And so we'd wake up and run home. And if it was moonlight, we'd run across the field, we could see. And if it was dark, then we'd have to go around the street where the street lights were. But yeah, that's the sort of thing we used to do. Another thing we used to do too was, I used to do. My father was a big cyclist and cycled all his life. In actual fact, he never owned a car, he always cycled. And so he wanted his son to cycle too, right? So he was a polo player, not like the rich and famous on horses, but on bicycles. These were bicycles that had smaller wheels and little handlebars about this wide with no attachments to it, just rubber handles. And they'd have this mallet about 4 foot long and on a stick 4 foot long and a ball about this size in diameter. And so I was pretty taken up with this. I thought this was pretty damn good. So he made me a bike. And we had a pretty big lawn in the front yard and about 30 by 15 or 20, something like that. But on the side it ran down to the steps, down to the street, which is about a 6 foot drop. And so I was going around with this stick and the ball, and I was doing great with this thing, and day after day. But what happened was, I lost control one day. Oh, I forgot to tell you, there's a fixed wheel. There's no brakes on this thing. The wheels are fixed, so if you want to stop, you've got to push backwards. So I lost control, went down the side of into the street, and there happened to be a row of cars coming down the street. They all pulled over, and I went under the first car. The guy got out, he ran to me, picked me up, and ran to the back of my house. And my grandmother was the only person in the house. She was raising me. And she came out, and I said, I'm okay. I used to call her Mum because that's the only person I knew. I never had a mother. I'm okay, Mum, I'm okay. I want to just shit my pants. so that was my second story. And you know what? I've forgotten what my third story is now. What was my third story?
Soccer.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
The third story is, I was a big soccer fan, right? Ever since I was 5 years old. And we used to go out and play 2-a-side, 3-a-side. I always was a goalkeeper. I loved being a goalkeeper. And I was a sweeper keeper before the Premier League ever thought about sweeper keepers. And my idol was Frank Swift. He was the English international goalkeeper. 6'3", slim, agile. I had a cutting on the wall in my bedroom of him 3 inches above the ground, totally parallel, and just tipping the ball around the post to save a goal. And I so wanted to be like Frank. And eventually I convinced my father to buy me a yellow jersey just like Frank's. And boy, was I feeling good. You know how kids are. I'm Frank Swift, right? And I'm diving all around over the place. And the kids are trying to get the ball through the goal. And this particular time, I dive. And I should tell you that we used to share the field with milking cows. I dived right into one of their pancakes. My yellow jersey was never ever the same. Every amount of washing, which is the stuff that I have nowadays, but it would never come out, and so I had to give it up in the end, and that was it. That's about the end of my story, I think. I almost fooled you because I wanted to tell another story about workplace harassment, and maybe I'll tell you that next time.
Well, Michael, I'm just realizing, did you make it when you were diving in your yellow jersey to? Oh, you always did. Okay. So it was worth it. Oh man, I can picture that. EJ is MIA, and Debbie, I think, also. And so that, Michael Lockhart, from an engineer to storyteller, he has shared his life's important moments with us in the past. We welcome him tonight. I have no idea what he's saying.
When one is in 4th grade and goes up to one of their friends and says, "Do you want to come over to my house and play game show?" I can tell you for a fact, the answer is no, and he won't be your friend anymore. I am obsessed with game shows. Ever since the 4th grade, or the 3rd grade, when I first saw her on a game show, my body tingled when I didn't know what that tingle really meant. And that is the GOAT of all game shows. You know who I'm talking about, people. Betty White. I love Betty White. So every Christmas, I didn't ask for G.I. Joe, and I didn't ask for train sets. I asked for the home versions of every game show. I had them all. I had Concentration. I had The Joker's Wild. I had The Sale of the Century. I had The Price is Right. I had Password. I had $10,000 pyramid. And when there was inflation, I asked for the $25,000 pyramid. I had them all. And when, even on Christmas Day, when I would get those from Santa, I would make my younger brother play with me. He'd play game show with me. He would run down the hallway and say, "Mom, Mike's trying to make me play game show." And my mom would yell, "Leave him alone." Nobody wanted to play game show with me, so I learned to play by myself. I would be the host, and I would be 1 to 3 contestants. And I had the best time just figuring out how to play all these game shows by myself. And on rainy days, I really had fun doing that for hours and hours. But folks, I wasn't only the host, and I wasn't only the contestant. Because while I was watching Betty White, and if I saw her and I was doing this, I also practiced to be the presenter, the model. And we know who the most famous one of this is on Let's Make a Deal. Carol Merrill, right? Remember her? I had spent hours, maybe hundreds, playing the show and doing that as well. And so if I happened to need, like I was playing The Price is Right, had to guess the price of a box of cereal, I would go down to the kitchen cabinet and pull out the box of cereal. Ready? concentration. I won the living room couch. I was on The Price is Right, and I had won the grand, fabulous showcase. I would go down to the middle of the living room, and if I had won the living room set, I am not joking. I know what you're all thinking right now. I know exactly what you're all thinking. He is really good at that. I know it. Years went by, and I only told a select few people that I had this obsession because of the experiences at young. My mother wouldn't even let my brother play a game show with me. So I told a few close friends, my parents knew, of course, and my brother, and a few friends from high school. They kind of knew my obsession with this, and I would admit it to them. And in college, there were girlfriends who actually didn't want to be my girlfriend once I told them this, but they still were women friends. So when I graduated college, two of these girlfriends who only decided to be women friends, they came up to me and they said, "Mike, we need you to come down to help us move down to California. We want your car." We had no money. "We want your car, and we have a great idea. We're gonna pack everything in our car, and you're gonna move down and live with us in LA. And you are gonna audition for all those game shows." And I said, "That's right. Forget like Habitat for Humanity. I'm not backpacking to Europe. I am going to the mecca of game shows of Burbank, California, and I am gonna get on one of those things." And all the time, in the back of my head, I'm still in love with Betty White. I mean, seriously, I am obsessed with Betty White. So we drive down there, and I go there, and they go off to work, and each day I went off to work. I looked up and found out how you audition for all these game shows, and I went through them all. I had more fun. I auditioned for all these game shows, as many as they were able to. And so it just so happened after a month, it took about a month to get through all these auditions, and I got a first call back, right? And it was for Password, Super Password. Now, wait a minute, guys. Do you know about Password? Are you really? Yeah. It is hosted, well, it used to be hosted by Betty White's husband, Alan Ludden. And it was taken over, so it became Super Password, and that was Bert Convy. And Bert Convy took over because Alan Ludden had died. And that was awesome, because that meant if Betty White was on the show, maybe, she would think of me as her boy toy game show guy. Maybe, I really thought that. So on the day of our taping, I go to Burbank with these two girlfriends, right? They were like, "Oh my," and I was like, "Oh my God." And we didn't know who the game show, the stars were gonna be on the show. Oh my God, please be Betty White. Betty White was always on Password. Please be Betty White. Please be Betty White. And I got there, and it wasn't Betty White. But if I had won through the 5 shows of that taping day and got to the next taping day, guess who was on the show? Betty White. And Robert Reed from the Brady Bunch, just to throw that in. So I said, okay. My name got pulled. It's kind of random, and I got pulled for the Monday show. So that meant I had to get through the Friday show so that I could come back for the next taping day where Betty White would be. 6 shows I had to get through. So I won the Monday, and I won Tuesday, and I won Wednesday, and I won Thursday, and I got to Friday, and honestly, in the last 2 minutes of the Friday taping, I lost. I went, oh my God. I'm not gonna be Betty White, and I'm gonna have to go home to Seattle to be an engineer. And my life, I realized at that moment on stage, if you see the tape of me, I'm like, oh my God. And that was when I knew my life was not gonna completely be this, right? So I drove back to Seattle by myself. I said goodbye to my friends, came back to be a Boeing engineer, and And I didn't date anybody for 13 years after that. Okay, not because of the Betty White thing, but if you ask me 100 reasons why I didn't really date that much, around number 68 would be, I was saving myself for Betty White still. So, 13 years later, I met somebody at our tennis club, these guys. And when I decided this was the person I thought I would ask, I said, I can't wait for Betty White any longer, I gotta do something. So we planned this summer party, and I decided this is the party I was gonna propose to her. So this is what I did. 1999, what was the biggest game show on TV? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Oh. And I made up a show for the party called Who Wants to Be a $100-millionaire? So I made all these questions, and I would put everybody's name in. During the party, a friend of mine and I, we would just randomly pull somebody, and I got to be the host. And I would ask the questions, and they could win $1 to $100. So we went through the party, nice party, everything, and then we made sure that this woman would be called last. So they had her name pulled. She came up, and I had really easy tennis questions for her. And you could see the gleam in her eye, because as the questions were really easy, she was like, oh, I'm getting this $100. That's all. I could see it. She's so competitive. I could see it in her eyes. I said, flipping the chart, and I get to the 10th question. And the 10th question was, will you marry me? And honest to God, she looked out to the group at the party and goes, I need a lifeline. I want to phone a friend. And I shockingly went, that is brilliant! And that's when I realized, all right, I had found my real Betty White. And so, to this day I go, like, what would I tell my younger self in the 4th grade? Don't change a damn thing.
That's possibly the most unusual story I think. That's really great. Oh, I love the ending.
Mike, big mic down.
Oh!
Too high?
Yeah,
Yes. Okay, there we go, all right. Thank you, Michael, that was really, really wonderful. And I love the romance part. Following Michael, Chris. Chris comes to us from the Fresh Ground Stories telling a group in Seattle. I heard her tell stories there, and I asked her, please come to Burien if you can, and she said, okay. So, welcome, Chris. Thank you very much.
I started in 2nd grade. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. I felt I had no choice, and then once I started, I couldn't stop. Now, let me give you a little background. 1st grade, I went to a public school 4 blocks away. And I was one of the youngest kids, and in New York City public school system, for some reason, at that time, they equated young with dumb. And so I was put in the slowest class. And my mother was really upset by this. She was afraid that I was not going to get a proper education. And so she spent that year researching alternative schools for me. And what she came up with was the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church that I would have to take 2 buses to get to. Now, for those of you who don't know, Missouri Synod is the most conservative of the Lutheran denominations. And I had a couple of things going against me. Obviously, didn't live in the neighborhood, so wasn't playing with any of the kids. Also, did not go to the church associated with the school, so didn't know people that way. And although I thought I was getting in on the ground floor, all the other kids, 28 of them, had started in kindergarten together. And so they had already formed their friendship groups. And though I tried really hard, I wasn't getting anywhere. Now, some might say, well, why don't you try some jokes and comedy? That usually helps you. But my teachers were not into levity. And so I had to use something else. And the only thing that I had was, I was a good student. I always read the assignments. I always did the homework. So when I heard someone say, gee, I couldn't get math problem 3, or I don't know grammar 6, I said, you want to copy mine? And I became popular. Now, once you start, of course, you can't stop. And you may say, well, wasn't that cheating? Or the abetting of cheating? That's one way to look at it. I considered that I was sharing. And sharing is a very Christian value. Like Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was ignorant, you gave me the answers. Okay, maybe that's a paraphrase, but Now, despite the fact that I thought I was sort of doing good, we all knew that our teachers would not view this in the same way. And so it was always done surreptitiously, and in all the time I was there, to the end of 8th grade, we were never caught. Yay me. Okay, and in 5th grade, we had to do a standardized test that was reading comprehension. And the way it was set up is that you took the test one day a week for several weeks. So the first week, everybody got the same set of questions. But after that, it depended on how many you got right. And it was color-coded, so you went to a different color when you were doing well. And that meant that you can't hand out the same thing to everybody. You had to know who took what test. And my teacher gave me the job of handing out and making sure each person got the right test. And in addition, there was this spreadsheet, and I had to correct all the answers and record it, and so that I know which person got what the next week. All fine. What I didn't understand was why I was given the answer keys before we took the test. Now, of course, since I had a reputation as a sharer, people would come up to me and say, orange. And that meant I should let them see the orange answer key so that they could quickly memorize the answers. And of course I did, because, I never quite understood it. Now, stay with me here. It'll be worth it.
Yeah.
My cousin was like 14 years older than me. And she was the first of the cousins to graduate from college, and she became a teacher at a Lutheran school, not my school. And years later, when I was a teenager and I had my driver's license, she ended up in the psych ward for schizophrenia, and I decided I wanted to go visit her. And so I went. She was really happy to see me, although I could tell she was upset. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, well, it's these voices in my head telling me what a bad person I am. She's a lovely person. And I said, well, why do they think you're so bad? And she said, well, when I was a teacher, they required me, in order to keep my job, to change the answers on some of the standardized tests of the kids who weren't doing well, I'd have to erase the wrong answers and put the right answers so that the school would look good. And although I didn't immediately make the connection, I later looked back at that 5th grade answer problem and said, ooh, I see what they were doing. I thought I was so smart that they never knew that I was sharing when they knew all the time. That's why they chose me. Because this way, they didn't have to do any dirty work. I was doing it for them. They could have the moral high ground and still look good to the, administrators. So I ask you now, who was the bigger sinner? Thank you.
First of all, teachers aren't coming off too well tonight. And then, secondly, I would have never had that problem because I never had all the right answers. Our next storyteller tonight is Daniel Njuguna. He considers himself a lifelong learner, and he's devoted himself to being a lifelong learner, which is something we all probably aspire to. And I'm very happy he's here to tell his second story for 7 stories. So welcome, Daniel.
The year is 2016. I am in central Kenya. That's where I was born and raised. By the way, I grew up saying water, not water. I had to learn that here. On this day, it's one of those beautiful days where it's sunny, it's calm, but don't be cheated by the outside appearance of everything, because my mind is at war. My mind is at war because I have a problem with the school principal, who happens to be my boss. I'm seated at the side of a swimming pool in an elementary school. We call them primary school. I work as a swimming teacher and also as a lifeguard. But there's a bigger problem here. The whole school, including my colleagues and I, have a problem with the principal, Principal Helen. Everybody's complaining, but nobody wants to face her. We feel that she has made everyone feel very unappreciated and very unimportant. And we feel, as a leader, she has failed to do her job and appreciate everyone. But I'm not going to take this anymore. I have a plan. I'm going to take the fall. I'm going to confront her. I'm going to walk into her office, give her a piece of my mind, and quit my job. I already have a brilliant business idea as a backup plan in case everything goes wrong. So at this point, I'm also very upset because the school pays me $170 a month. That's it, $170 a month. Translate that into hourly rate, that would be $1 an hour. Who in the hell earns $1 an hour? The answer to that is nobody. I have all the right to be angry, and nobody want to talk about it, but not me. So, my mind is made up. After an hour of negotiation in my mind, I stand up on my feet, and I start walking toward the hallway to Principal Helen's office, the longest walk of my life. I feel like I'm walking in the air. So as soon as I get to the door, I'm not yet made up my mind. I'm still asking myself, Daniel, do you still want to do this? Something tells me, come on, do it. trying to raise my hand. I still can't. But finally, I knocked the door. Knock, knock, knock. And as soon as she answered the door, I burst in and I started pouring the poison, anger, rage. I tell her, I'm not here for any kind of negotiation. Neither am I here to ask for a raise. I'm here to quit my job. At this point, she's confused. I told her, the whole time I've been an employee in this company, in the school, you've always talked about what is wrong, not what is right. You criticize everybody in this school. I'm sick and tired. I can't take this anymore. I slammed the keys, my resignation letter on the table. I look at her face and I see the face of defeat. And I feel good. I feel good because I realize she feels the same way we've been feeling, but she's never had anyone talk to her about it. I'm hoping that I'm going to change her whole attitude, the attitude about how she treats everybody. I put the keys on the table, I put my resignation letter on the table, and I walk out. I was not ready for any excuse or any apologies. 30 minutes later, I'm standing in front of my apartment door. I'm trying to open my padlock. But for some reason, it doesn't open. I'm not starting to get upset. I keep trying to open, and it doesn't. So I decided to call the building manager, Mr. Joseph. Hey, Mr. Joseph, did you change my padlock by any chance? Because I have already paid rent. He says, no, I have not. Keep trying. So back home, what they do is if you haven't paid rent, they will change the padlock or add an extra layer of padlock as a punishment for your late payment. So I keep trying, then I realized the padlock had been unlocked the whole time. Oh my goodness. In that moment, I knew somebody had broken into my apartment. I just quit my job, and here I am. Somebody had just broken into my apartment. So I quickly pulled the padlock, and I pushed open the door, and behold, everything laying on the floor. Somebody had just walked away with my life possessions in my one and only suitcase. The only thing that I got left is the bed and the blanket, the bed and the mattress. Obviously that couldn't fit in a suitcase. So I'm seated in my bed. I'm seated on my bed. I'm looking at myself, young guy. I look into the future. The future looks bleak. So it doesn't take long before my life starts sinking to the bottom of the ocean. The plan that I had, the brilliant business plan that I had, didn't even take off the ground. It failed completely. I found myself, I can't pay rent. I also can't afford food. I knew for sure I need help. I picked up my phone and called my friend, Anthony. I told him, hey, Anthony, I'm really in big trouble. I would like you to take me in for about a month or two. When I put my life together, I will be out. My friend Anthony says, yeah, come on, brother, come on in. I will help you. And that's when I knew that people can pick you up when you're down there. So 2 months living with Anthony, I'm reading every book. I'm browsing through the internet, searching for the next business idea that's gonna save my life. And sure enough, just like a miracle, I just stumbled upon a business idea that turns out it changes my life forever. Wine bottle recycling. I looked at all the wine bottles in the city that people call trash. To me, that was cash. There's one thing I needed. I needed to fabricate an electronic bottle cutter that will help me do the job. And I did it so perfectly. Before I knew it, my glasses, my chandeliers are all over the market, and everybody's talking about how cool they are and how they've changed their lives. And 3 months later, I am in the newspaper. 2 TV channels had already featured my whole story. I'm famous, and I'm making money. And I realized, for a while, I had felt like the universe was trying to punish me for taking that bold move of confronting my boss. But then, when this happened, I knew for sure that maybe it was a really cool idea of walking into Principal Helen's office and giving her a piece of my mind. So my advice to my younger self would be, Daniel, just keep doing what you do. Thank you.
Wow, that was an odyssey. I tell you, I was really nervous when you were at your apartment door. That was great, great ending. Jeff has dived in tonight to tell his story, and I'm really, really grateful. He's told us significant stories in the past of his life, and I'm interested to see about what he's got tonight. So thank you, Jeff.
A friend of mine is an author, and he's written a number of books in a series. In fact, I think it was originally going to be a trilogy, and now it's near 18 books. It may even be 19. It's called the Middle Falls Time Travel Series. It's a book. All the books are, he calls it redemption. So every main character of each book, at some point in their life, dies and wakes back up at an earlier time in their life and get to live their life over again. Anywhere from 19 to 90. Some do it multiple times. They get to do relationships over again, career choices, etc. It's pretty fun and intriguing to contemplate what I might do different if I could go back and do my life over again. Well, of course, that's not practical. I do like to contemplate it. In fact, I love to contemplate all of life, and although I have not written books, I have done 4 talks. I've facilitated 4 topical dinner discussions. Last year, I recorded and posted 150 videos. And on my next venture, are doing podcasts. Well, a friend of mine, Blake, Scott knows Blake, has a studio, and we recorded what was going to be the introduction to our podcast. Well, Blake has been a radio host, he's used to interviewing people, and his idea was, we'll interview you, and that will be your introduction to doing your podcast, so people have an idea who I am. Well, Blake's kind of rattling off questions, and I don't have any time to think. One of his questions was, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you say? And I didn't have time to think. But what came to me immediately was, trust yourself. Trust yourself. Now, I suspect some of you or others may be able to give yourself that same advice, and it would likely or potentially have different meaning. For me, I have always had words. I've always been able to look at the world, form words to express what I was thinking, an experience that I had, thoughts, challenges, but I shouldn't, because I'm not educated in it. My degree's in business management or human resource management, not in writing. So how could I be a writer? How could I be a speaker? Believe it or not, as I found myself daydreaming when I was young, I imagined myself standing on stages and speaking. But how could I do that? I'm not trained. I have no education, no particular skill. But trust yourself. Well, I can't go back and do life over again, of course. And as I was contemplating the topic, it occurred to me that for my future self, I am currently my younger self. So what advice might I give my younger self if I could pretend or imagine I'm an older Jeff? I give myself the same advice. Trust yourself. So what would that look like? Well, I want to share with you that as I sat here, contemplating, coming up here and talking, thinking, oh no, what am I going to do with my hands when I'm standing up there? And listen to those people talk. They're great. I'm not going to be like that. No, Jeff, yours isn't really a story. It's more like, I don't know, a talk or a speech. Shoot, could you make up a story real quick? Could you tell another story? Totally do a different thing than you thought you were going to do when you got here. Yeah, this doubt goes on in my mind. And not everybody is going to like the way in which I speak, or the words and the order in which I put them in. But somebody will, potentially some. And Jeff, you're on a journey. Trust yourself. Thank you.
Ah, that was great. That was great. And it's good advice. I take it to heart. I like that. Thank you very much. I love this night. I don't, it's just, it feels like I'm privileged to, that people trust me with their secrets, with their innermost thoughts, and I really feel privileged. It's an honor. I'm all emotional. I love this night. Our last storyteller is Gaylloyd Sisson, and I have no idea what Gaylloyd's going to say. Just like last time, I did not know. So, but we welcome him. Gaylloyd's always a treat. So.
Jeff, I'm really glad you went ahead of me. Primarily because that's part of my theme too, is to trust yourself. And the thing is that I was trying to figure out, the theme is, what would you tell your younger self? Well, I have a son that's much younger than me because I'm his dad. He's a wonderful son. I love him. And I give him all that information that I would have told myself should I have been his age. My son is adopted, so I didn't have him all the time. I acquired him in the 6th grade. And I was his teacher. I didn't know he was going to be my son at that time. And later on, he came up to me and asked me if I would be his dad because the man that's his father was in jail again, and I had abused him, and he gave that information to me. And I realized that he really didn't know much about anything in life, other than what he got in school. And he followed me around in school, but I didn't pay much attention to that either because he's just a kid. But when he asked me to be his father, to be his dad, and I agreed, I said, well, what does he need? Well, how can I help him? So the first thing we did was we met in, he was living with his mother, so we met in the library and discussed what he would study in college. And I just, I was sure that after all that discussion, he was going to be a mechanical engineer because he told me all these things that he liked to do. And he got immersed in his studies, and I didn't see him too much during college. He'd call me or see me once in a while, but he was in college running around meeting all these young ladies that he didn't tell me about. He told me more about them than he told me anything about his studies. But I wanted him to become an entrepreneur. I am. I mean, yes, I taught school. My primary income was through the businesses that I owned. And I thought that's what, especially for minorities, working for somebody else gets old. Having your own business and helping other people by being an employer is something outstanding, I thought. And that's what I wanted him to do. He graduated and where'd you get your degree in? And he never told me. Teaching. Teaching? Yes. You're a teacher, Dad. I want to be just like you. So what do you tell your son? What do you tell your son? Well, you want him to, you want him to think for himself. You want him to be creative. And one of the things I discovered that as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to keep your word. That's very important. But he didn't. He would tell me, Dad, I'll see you tomorrow, or I'll see you next week, or we're going to do this, and then he disappeared. The worst was when I expected him to come and help me in my yard, and he called me up and said, Dad, I'm in San Diego. So I thought it was very important for me to teach him how to keep his word. And then after he graduated, he asked me what he's going to do for the rest of his life now that he graduated. Should he find a teaching position right here in Seattle? And I said, no, man, you're so young, you need to travel. So he went off to Argentina first, learned how to speak Spanish. He said he was behind a hostel, and somebody ordered a Coke and it was on the bottom shelf, so he bent down to get the bottom shelf, and while he was down there, the gangsters came in the room, took everybody's wallet, their passports and everything. He just stayed down there. and they left. That was an experience for him. And he texted me about it. And then he started texting me every day. He has texted me every day for the last 5 years. I'm just looking through that. As I say, my mom. And through that, I was hoping when I would come here and tell you about what I would tell myself, my younger self, or him, I looked through those texts and I saw what I would tell him how to, if he felt he was in a dangerous situation. One time he said, these people they discriminate against me because I'm dark skinned. What should I do? And I said, find some other friends. You don't need to be around them. If they start talking about that, find some other friends. And I thought, oh, that's what I should have told myself. So, but he did. He followed my direction, and he had a lot of new great friends. From Argentina, I came back to Seattle and asked me again, what should he do? So we sat down and I found a job for him in Spain, and he went to Toledo and he taught just a couple of months before COVID, he was teaching there, and then bam, COVID. And they wouldn't let him leave his apartment for the whole rest of the year. And he was getting stir crazy. And he texts me every day about what's going on and how people were standing on their balcony and playing their instrument. And I said, you need to play an instrument. And so he got a ukulele, and he told me he was learning how to play the ukulele. I sent him some music in the mail for ukulele, and then he called me up, and we did a video. And he played his ukulele, and I pulled out my flute, and I played my flute together with him. And oops, this thing, I like it, but I don't need to hit it. So he had, making a long story short, I'll leave it at number one. He has developed a website development business. He goes online and he does all the research there on how to develop websites. And now Belgium, he just flew to Belgium. They interviewed him and they want him to go through a, what do you call it, Kathleen? Internship there.
Oh, internship, yeah.
So he's becoming an intern. And he's still learning how to trust himself too. And I feel like I have succeeded in not only trusting myself, but I trust that I've taught him everything he needs to know.
And I want to thank you all for being here and to drop a donation in the box when you leave if you can. And then also the next storytelling is, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And that's April 24th, I think is the same, the fourth Friday in April. So think about that theme, tell your friends and colleagues and connections, and come back in April for another good night. Thank you.
Just before everybody goes, I had another Indian, and it's really important.
Make the point core.
Yeah, the Indian is, one of the things my son definitely needed to learn was to listen. And I discovered that most men need to learn to listen. So I came up with this thing. First, learn to listen. Second, listen to learn.
That's good. Okay.